Welcome to the HatzalaCast, the podcast that takes you on an in-depth and behind-the-scenes journey with local Hatzala and EMS volunteers to hear their stories and get a better perspective on the lives of these local heroes. Now here's your host, Zeesha Littman. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the HatzalaCast. This is episode 5. My name is Zeesha Littman. I'm the host of this really cool show. And since we've launched the show, we've gotten tremendous amounts of feedback coming in from people all over the world who've always had a very good interest in understanding what goes on behind the scenes in the Hatzala world. And now they have the opportunity to listen to real volunteers giving over real experiences every single day. This show is partially brought to you by Hatzala Beit Shemesh, the local Hatzala organization in Ramat Beit Shemesh, the only one of its kind in Israel to offer full EMS transport and with their own set of ambulances. It's a really cool organization. You can check them out online at www.hatzbs.org. And this week's episode, we're actually sitting down with another volunteer from that organization, but in a different capacity. We're sitting down with the lovely Dr. Yosef Topek, who is the head of the EFR unit. And for those of you who don't know what EFR is, it's emotional first response. And emotional first response is something that I find very fascinating in terms of the unit, what they do, and how they are super critical to the situation at hand. So I'm not going to talk about this because you don't want to hear it from me. You want to hear it from the doctor. So welcome to the show, Dr. Topek. How are you this morning? And it's a lovely winter day we're having here in Beit Shemesh, isn't it?
Yes, thank you. I'm doing well, Baruch Hashem. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you about some of what it is that we do.
Cool. Like I said, I'm happy to have you because when I first found out about what the EFR unit is, I thought that was something very, very unique and very special. And from what I understand, not many organizations offer this type of, I don't want to call it a service, but like I'd say this type of care in addition to the standard EMS and the standard treatment that most people would get. So what is the EFR unit? What's the story behind it? And how did you get involved in it?
Okay, so let me tell you a bit about the EFR unit and how it started and what it is that we do, et cetera. So how it started was, unfortunately, about, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, there was a horrible accident that took place here in Ramat Beit Shemesh. There was a bad car accident that sadly, Rahman al-Islam, took the life of a little boy. In a very busy intersection here in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So at the time when this happened, Hatzala units from all Hatzalas that are in Ramat Beit Shemesh, meaning Hatzalah and Hatzala Beit Shemesh, were called into the scene over there. I was called in because I also do some work with Hatzalah in their PsychoTrauma unit because there was a lot of bystanders that watched what had taken place. So at the time, the Hatzala Beit Shemesh units that were called in, a lot of them witnessed what took place. And because of it, a lot of them had a very difficult time dealing with what they saw. For some of them, it was their first time seeing a call of the kind. For some of them, it was just it was a traumatic experience to be involved in. So I was, being friends with some of the Hatzala Beit Shemesh members, I was called in after the fact. They were having a debrief to discuss with their units who were present or anybody else who wanted to join to kind of just to debrief and go through what it is that they experienced to make sure that they weren't holding on to anything, which, by the way, is something very important to do if you are involved in any experience like this. So I was called in and at the time, I sat through the debrief, I listened, and unfortunately, like I said, some of the units were really shaken up by it. And I had an opportunity to talk to some of them individually, to go through with them what it was they experienced, and to help guide in any way that I can through that experience. So afterwards, I was pulled over by somebody from the VAD of Hatzala Beit Shemesh, and they said that throughout the day, they had received calls from other individuals, not Hatzala Beit Shemesh units, but people living in Beit Shemesh who had seen what had taken place, and the units were being called in because, one boy had locked himself in his bedroom because he experienced it and he saw it. And he approached me and said, we don't know what to do with these cases. We don't know what to do with these calls. How would you feel about getting together with some people and helping to guide us and to figure out what to do? So that was kind of how it was born. And I got together with somebody else who's a dispatcher, Zeesha, who helps me, and we lead the program together, the unit together rather, and we discussed different ways and different ideas that we could have, and how we could best serve the community was to gather together a handful of mental health professionals. That means psychologists, social workers, therapists who could volunteer and who could kind of be on call when Hatzalah Beit Shemesh receives calls of this type. And let me explain to you what I mean by this type. I don't mean PsychoTrauma calls. I don't mean calls of people who witness horrible events. I mean actual calls where somebody might call in and say, can you please send an ambulance? My daughter, my niece, my wife, my mother is having some form of a psychotic break. She's in her room screaming at herself. She's threatening to jump out the window. She's threatening to hurt somebody. My child is 15 and he's threatening to run away. He's threatening to be violent. So anything that does not have to do with only medical, our units are called in. So the first response, the first people that are called in are actual Hatzalah Beit Shemesh units who also have gone through a training with myself and Zeesha to become what we call EFR units. That's emotional first response units. So there's a handful of Hatzalah Beit Shemesh members who also are trained with a secondary training in emotional first response. So they'll be called in if it's a call that the dispatcher feels is going to have a piece of this. Those units are sent to that call. If they get to the call and they say, this is big, this is heavy, I need some backup, then they will call in what we call MHP, which are our mental health professionals. And like I said, I believe right now we have 6 of those.
Wow.
And we get a call that's sent out on our WhatsApp, and then, is it man, woman, English speaking, Hebrew speaking, and then we take it from there and we'll go to the scene. And once we get to the scene, we'll help to, offer whatever it is that we can in our limited capacity to help to either diffuse the situation, to help convince the patient to get into the ambulance for transport. And, since the formation of this unit, we've had some vital and some very interesting calls that we've all, Baruch Hashem, been able to go on and been able to help out to the best of our abilities.
Oh, that's incredible. I actually remember that incident that happened when the boy got run over. It was the boy that got run over by the bus, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I remember that. It was a very traumatic incident because and the problem with that intersection, it's a terrible intersection, and it's not the first. Unfortunately, it's not the first time that something's happened over there. And, and I can imagine. I remember actually walking down over by there, and I was like, "What is going on?" And the fact that you guys showed up, but that was before this whole unit started. I think that's amazing that was the catalyst that started this whole unit. And
that was before the unit started.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
and I'm sure the amount of work, the amount of good, and the amount of help you did to people who who had witnessed that incident, definitely has been tremendous. Now, it seems very interesting what you do. You said there's a difference between the PsychoTrauma unit and the EFR unit, and what are some of the intrinsic differences?
So
you said you work for both, because you said you work with both organizations, so I might as well ask the question.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a great question. I'll tell you, and I was gonna speak about this as well. When we first started the unit, Zeesha and I sat down together with Moshe Braun and a few other people at the time, and we were discussing where's the hole? What can we fill? When something as unfortunate as that bus accident takes place, do we need to send our EFR units, our mental health professionals? So the answer we came up with was no. Ichud Hatzalah already has a unit for that. They have their Chosen unit. They do a wonderful job, tremendous work, unbelievable. There's no hole there. That's already being filled. But where's the hole? The hole is when somebody gets a call, I don't want to divulge any information, so I'll come up with, with an example of a call I took, but we'll make it as generic as possible. When somebody gets a call that their young adult daughter is threatening to harm themselves, and they can't get them to get into an ambulance, in some kind of psychotic break, they think people are talking to them and telling them to do things, right? You can send a Hatzala unit there, they'll get there, and what are they going to do? Not much. They're not trained, and they're not. What they'll end up doing is they'll end up calling the police. The police will come, they'll become aggressive, the whole situation will blow up into something that it may not have to be. And again, don't get me wrong, there are times when the mental health professionals arrive at the scene and we say, this ain't happening. I've been here for an hour. We got to get the police involved. And sometimes that is the only way. I'm not saying that, as a mental health professional, we come in and we have these magic words that work. It doesn't. Yeah. That's not what it is. But that's where the hole was, right? Yeah. The hole was in cases like that. Can you send a unit here? My son has a knife and he's threatening to hurt people and he's going to run away.
Right.
When something like that comes in, the first people we call are the police, because safety is always of the utmost importance.
Right.
But if we can send either an emotional first responder and or a mental health professional along and get there with the police, then we can hopefully, help to diffuse the situation so that the police don't have to become aggressive.
Right.
And that's kind of the hole that we filled in, again, because Ichud will come in and do an amazing job after Chas v'Shalom, there's a bomb. After Chas v'Shalom, there's a horrible traffic accident. They'll come in and they'll help with the people that saw it. After, Chas v'Shalom, somebody wakes up and they find that, I hate to even say it, but their child or their parent is no longer living. They'll call Ichud in and they'll say, can you help? This person, is going into shock. We don't want them to go into shock. So that's where Ichud Hatzalah is called in. Mm-hmm. More with the actual patient and actually what's happened. That being said, once we are there on the call, we'll help out and we'll check in. If my child is wielding a knife and threatening to hurt everybody, we get to the call and we find out that there's children upstairs locked in a room, then we'll go upstairs and knock on the door. Hey, is everybody okay? Mm-hmm. We'll do a check-in to make sure, that's not to say that we're not going to check in on the post-trauma possibilities in the situation, but that's not really what our main focus is for our unit. Wow. So that's like the main difference, I guess.
No, so it seems like you guys are more involved in the situation, and than the psychotrauma units, and you're more involved in the emotional aspect, like you said, dealing with people who are unfortunately mentally unstable, or if there's something where something with issues with people, like you're more involved in that end. It seems like you come and you calm down the situation, and you make sure that everything gets under control.
Right. And direct patient contact.
That's incredible. And
yeah,
are there any other Hatzalah organizations in the world that do this as well, or are you guys like one of the more unique ones?
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't know of any other. And I will tell you, actually, just this week, I had a call from somebody in Yerushalayim who said, I'm having an issue. I'm calling Magen David Adom. My child needs to be hospitalized. I heard that you run a unit with Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, and I don't want to get the police involved. Can you send somebody over to help to get him into the ambulance and to escort him? Unfortunately, I definitely could not do it as part of Hatzalah Beit Shemesh. I spoke to them about the possibility of, coming as a private concerned citizen. It didn't work out in the end, but I know that, nothing else that I know of exists. And I really think that, I think that Baruch Hashem, under the guidance of, the Hatzalah Beit Shemesh Vad, and particularly Moshe Braun, the work that he's allowing us to do, and the ability that he's giving myself and Zeesha and everybody else involved, and the trust that he's putting into us, I think it's really, I think that that we've been able to do tremendous things, Baruch Hashem, and that there's still a lot of room to do a lot more of this type of work.
Right. I feel like I feel like what you guys are doing, there definitely should be there definitely is a hole to fill with other organizations around the world, because unfortunately, and I know in our communities, the mental health issue is a very taboo subject, and and when you're dealing with people in this capacity, and you don't have the right people to come out there and help them, it could turn into a really bad situation. I mean, like, I heard a story over Shabbos, from somebody I know who volunteers with a Hatzalah organization, and we're talking about the emotional first response, and he said he heard once a story come from an organization. He didn't say the name, and they responded to a call about a teenager who was found hanging in his room, and they cut him down. They looked him loose, and one of the volunteers looked at him and said, "You're such a baltitzah, you couldn't even kill yourself right."
Oh my goodness.
And I said, you don't want that. Yeah,
no,
you don't want that, and this is why your type of unit is so important. Because when you experience that trauma, when you experience that emotional distress, you need somebody to calm them down. You need somebody as a mediator to come and calm them down.
Right.
When I heard that story, I was just like, wow, like, oh.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, I will tell you some of the other work that we do.
Yeah.
Is that we've had an opportunity to train all of the staff.
Yeah.
And to talk to all of the staff about what we do and the importance of what we do. And kind of the hope is that even though all the units of Hatzalah Beit Shemesh are not trained to be emotional first responders,
right, but
work that we do will trickle down, and we won't have a situation where a responder says something like that to a patient, right, because that's just it's very dangerous. I mean, it's not just gross. How could you be so horrible? It's dangerous. That's Pasha what it is. It's just a very dangerous.
Right. You're poking the bear.
Right. Exactly. And something else, while we're discussing something else that we do and that I offer is that not just our emotional first responders, but any of our responders that had a difficult call, that are having a difficult time with something related to their work with Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, I make myself available to talk to them. I make myself available to meet with them, whether it's in my office, whether it's at the Hatzalah Beit Shemesh office, on the phone. I wouldn't even call it a debrief, because Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, Baruch Hashem, something else wonderful that they do is when there's a difficult call, and I'm not just talking about something that has to do with emotional first responders, any type of medical call that could be deemed difficult, they call for a debrief of everybody that was involved. Or if one of the responders feels that it was a difficult call, they themselves can call up, I believe they normally get in touch with Zeesha, and they'll say, I had something difficult, can we put together a debrief? And they'll do that, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to get together. And it also, I'll say, selfishly, it benefits me because I get to see more of the inner workings of what goes on, because, like I said, I kind of dove in. I wasn't involved at all. I'm not a dispatcher. I was nothing. So I had to learn the ropes as to, like, what does it mean when you say this code? What does that mean? What, dispatcher, what's a dispatcher? Call goes out, and I didn't, I came in not knowing anything.
Wow.
But I was accepted, and really, things were explained to me. And it's just, it's an absolute pleasure and a kavod to work with such an organization that recognizes the need for such type of care. Because like you said, not every organization, even the helping organizations who are involved with helping people, who are involved with cutting down that rope, they don't have the, I don't even want to say sensitivity, because they weren't trained in it. I don't necessarily blame them, but I think that Baruch Hashem Hatzalah Beit Shemesh does an amazing job at really, expanding what it is, the services that they offer, and allowing us to be part of them is really, not just for the community, but for us as volunteers, it's tremendous bracha, really.
No, but that's what I think it's really amazing and groundbreaking work, because, like I said before, in our communities, mental health is a very, very unfortunate taboo subject. and to be able to be out there and open about, yes, people have mental health issues. People have people in our communities, whether it's in Beit Shemesh or Jerusalem or New York or Detroit or wherever, people from Yidden suffer from mental health issues. And the fact that you have somebody familiar to you, coming to you, helping you, calming you down, and speaking your language, whether it's Hebrew or English, Yiddish, lo mashana, you know what, it's a very, very good thing to be a part of, because not only are you doing so much good, but you're also showing people that this does not have to be such a taboo subject. This doesn't have to be such a hush-hush situation. And I've always wondered that, like, why is that? Like, as I mean, in your profession, I'm sure you deal with this a lot. So I always wonder that, like, why?
It's a great question. I agree with you. It shouldn't be, obviously. I think that, it's a very private matter, because when somebody has a mental health issue, it's not something that they wear on their sleeve. It's not something that they just wear out there. I will share with you an anecdote that I heard, and I'm gonna quote it. It was several years ago. When I say several years ago, I mean probably 15, maybe more years ago. I was in Chicago at the Chicago Community Kollel, and Shmuel Kamenetsky was doing a question and answer. And at the time, this was right when mental health and therapy was really in the Jewish community just coming out to be something accepted. The Jewish Observer had just done like a big article on it, and people were just learning about it. And somebody said to Rav Shmuel, one of the questions was, when I'm looking over a resume for a shidduch, if I see that the man or the woman has gone to a psychologist, do I need to be concerned? Should I stay away from that? So Shmuel's response, which I thought was awesome, and I quote it all the time, was, I need to check with my therapist, I'll let you know. In other words, like, totally not. And then he went on and he said, if you see that they've never seen a therapist, I'd be more concerned than if they are. Obviously, he was exaggerating, but I think it was his way of saying this needs to be something that's accepted. This is not taboo. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. I mean, and I'll tell you, the work I do with Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, even if, sadly we know, those of us who live in Ramat Beit Shemesh can walk around, whether it's a Friday night or any night, and we can see what the Sivuv Dolev looks like, or what Ayalon Park, or there's the areas. And people familiar with it know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the teenagers that are hanging out. And we also get calls about runaways. We get calls about, my 15-year-old ran away. I've had a knock at my door as somebody who's in the community and a psychologist in the community who does private work also with teenagers and yeshiva guys. I've had a knock on my door from teenagers who knock on my door, say, Dr. Topek, Yosef, I need to talk. I can't be in my house. I got to get out of there. And I say, well, do your parents know? No, I didn't tell them. They're going to call Hatzala. I don't care. Let them call Hatzala. I said, when they call Hatzala, Hatzala's going to call me. So I'm going to be involved either way. Let's go ahead and call your parents. My point of saying this is that we're used for stuff like that to, again, diffuse the situation. Help me find my child. Okay, we found the child. What do I do? He won't come into the house. Help me. What do I do? And we're not there for long-term help. We're not. We're not being hired or volunteering to be the private therapist for, the parents who are going through this, or the child, or the adult who's having mental health issues and needs to be transported to the hospital. We're there right now to help diffuse it, to help make sure everything is safe, to help make sure that everybody knows what the next step is, and then we step out of it. And that's really all we're for. And that's important for us to remind ourselves, because as somebody who's used to kind of following up and staying with my clients and staying with my patients, I need to remind myself, and I've been reminded by the Hatzalah Beit Shemesh units who have much more experience than me. If I'm in there chatting and talking to the parent who says, I don't want my child to go to the hospital. And I say, okay, well, let's talk about what I have to be reminded, like, Yosef, no, we got to get this person out and to the hospital. And I got to remind myself, that's right. That's what I'm here for. And to put on my Beit Shemesh hat rather than my therapist hat. But it's incredible.
What are do you have any interesting stories? I mean, how long have you've been doing this with them for 3 years, but how long have you been involved in this type of work?
So I've been involved, you're talking about as like a psychologist?
Yeah.
So I've been practicing for close to 14 years now.
Wow.
I like to say I spent the first 6 years in prison. You were in jail? No, I was a psychologist in prison in Texas, actually. I worked for the juvenile probation department in Houston, Texas before making Aliyah. And that was wild. I mean, it was just, it was,
I'm sure.
yeah, as they say, it was a trip. I mean, it was really, the stories I have from there. But I'll tell you, working for the Jewish community, it can be more difficult than even working in the prison. While, part of my issue has always been taking things home
Right.
and taking my work home. And I did have that issue. Don't get me wrong. When I worked in the prison, it was hard. It was hard to, be dealing with, the awful things that people are in jail for. And then to go home and to either, to go home and to be a parent, to go home and to be a chavrusa, to go home and to get myself, immersed in that. But when you're dealing with, and this for sure with Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, this hits me. To be dealing with a yid, to be dealing with a brother, to be dealing with a sister, it's really hard. And you have to separate yourself. And, when I said that we offer an opportunity for our units to do a debrief after they receive a difficult call, it's very important for us as well. It's very important for our own mental health professional units to be able to stop after a call, to be able to take a step back, to be able to separate ourselves. Zeesha shared with me, and I'm not going to share it. It's hers to share, but experiences that she's had where she's had to really literally separated herself. And this is my Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, and this is who I am. And I've had experiences also where I walk into a house and I see the disarray and, I see the dysfunction, and it's not like, oh, they're over there and I'm over here. Like these are my brothers. These are my sisters. This is my family. And, and it's difficult and it's hard. It really is.
That takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice and a lot of patience and like a lot of like strength to be able to pull yourself from both ways. I mean, it's interesting that you said that you worked in the prison, and dealing with the Jewish community is much more difficult than dealing with prison. And I find that very interesting. Now, do you have any crazy stories that you've dealt with over the years dealing with this in the FR unit, or like? I mean, you probably can't say, but.
Right. It's hard to say. Like, I'll say crazy. I don't know if that's like, that's, I guess, like the layman's term. Like we get in trouble for saying crazy, but difficult situation. I would say, I wish at the top of my head I could think of like something that was like really cool to share with everybody over here. But I will say, not obviously, but the most difficult situations are the attempted suicides. It's very hard to see and to be with somebody who's, we can't imagine the pain that is. And sadly, it happens, and it's there, and it's painful. Yeah. Some of the situations, I don't want to say funny, but like, we'll get a call about like a runaway, and we'll get to the house and we'll be talking with the parents and helping them to kind of process what's going on. And then, it turns out that the kid was in the basement the whole time, like under the bed. That's kind of like the best case scenario, right? Is when it's, oh, did you check upstairs? Oh, wait, really? Oh, okay. We have a great picture of, I think it was a Friday afternoon, and some of our units were called into a house. This was a medical call to take, I believe it was to take a woman to the hospital, and the husband went with, and they left home children. So we have this picture of our Hatzalah Beit Shemesh units sitting with their vests and their gear and babysitting these kids on a Friday afternoon until the aunt could come and arrive. So that just kind of touches upon like all the different pieces of like what it takes to be Hatzalah Beit Shemesh. We like to joke around that like, yeah, you have to be trained in babysitting as well to be able to join this team. But to answer your question, it's just like, it's really a vast, we really get calls about a lot of different things, and our units are really expected to be creative. I know that on one Shabbos afternoon, somebody was called into a house to speak with somebody, a woman who needed to be transported, and they couldn't get her out of bed. So what did the unit do? Like, what would you do if someone's in bed and they're facing the wall? So she went over and got into the bed, not into the bed, but like lied down next to the person so they could make eye contact. There was obviously enough space that it was nothing inappropriate.
Right.
But, we have to be creative. We really have to like think outside of the box sometimes.
Right.
What can we do to diffuse it? What can we do to make sure that the police don't have to come in here and physically get this person out of the house?
So that's my next question to you. You mentioned something about a Shabbos call. Where do you guys fit in terms of Pikuach Nefesh Docha Shabbos, in terms of going out on these calls? Since yes, you are necessary. It is potentially Pikuach Nefesh, but in terms of like the other volunteers, the EMS volunteers, there's that ability to go do that. So where do you guys fit in terms of Shabbos and Pikuach Nefesh?
It's a great question. So, for example, with Ichud Hatzala, there's no Pikuach Nefesh at all. Meaning not Ichud, I'm sorry, with the Chosen unit.
Right.
Dealing with psychotrauma, it's very important work, don't get me wrong, but that can't be Docha Shabbos. But our unit, we've asked Shilas and we've been advised that it is Pikuach Nefesh. If somebody Chas Shalom is threatening suicide, if somebody Chas Shalom is having some kind of mental health break, we don't know what that means. We don't know what that's going to look like. What's that going to cause? So we view that as something that is just as dangerous as Chas Shalom, a heart attack. So what we do with our unit, with our mental health professionals, is somebody different is on call every Shabbos, and we'll carry our phone with us, and we'll know if it rings and it's the number of the dispatcher that we answer the phone, and we will get in our car using all the grummas that, we've been advised by our own personal Rav or by Hatzalah Beit Shemesh, whatever it is they've taught us, and we will go to the scene, even on Shabbos. But because it is Pikuach Nefesh. It really is. It's really, it's life or death that we're talking about.
Wow. That is really fascinating. Because I've always wondered that in terms of what you guys do, how do you go about that? But I guess you answered the question very nicely.
Yeah.
And why? And so you're saying, but the psychotrauma is not something that is subject to be Docha the Shabbos, just because it's not a necessity. Like it doesn't happen all the time.
Right. It's not just that. Right. It's not necessary. Somebody's not necessarily going to go into shock, and even if somebody goes into some kind of psychosomatic, or not psychosomatic, but a traumatic. They see a traumatic event and they go, and they go into some kind of post-traumatic stress or something like that. Number one, it can, while it's better to deal with it in the now, it is something that can be dealt with later, and it's not something that is definitely going to lead to harm, to somebody harming themselves. Whereas again, ours isn't either definitely something.
Right.
But when we look at mental health and we talk about mental health and we say mental health is the same thing as physical health,
Sure, 100%.
When somebody has a depressive disorder, I will say, to somebody that's really no different than having a physical illness. Yes, 100%. It's mental, but it's, so when we look at it through those lenses, we're looking at the work that we do as, that kind of work that is Docha Shabbos.
No, 100%. Wow. I really learned a lot. And I'm sure our subscribers and our listeners have really learned a lot into this, because like I said, you're really you're like a one of a kind unit, and there's not many people out there. And I hope that anybody who listens to this is part of another Hatzalah organization can get some inspiration from this and potentially go out there and start their own EFR unit. I mean, what would it take for other organizations to do something like this?
I personally am happy to talk to, if anyone else out there is listening, with other organizations, I'm happy to talk to you, about it. I think what it takes is to have, to have committed people, to have willing volunteers, because while I'm sitting here speaking, I am in no way running this unit on my own. I am in no way going on the calls on my own. We have amazing, amazing volunteers. And I'm not just talking about the EFR units with Hatzalah Beit Shemesh. I'm talking about the MHPs. I'm talking about, seasoned, psychologists and therapists who have, clients who are, they're turning away because they're overbooked. These people are taking time out of whether it's their schedules, their lives, their family, to go on these calls and to help out these people, to volunteer. I mean, we can be on a call and it's not just going for 5 minutes.
Right.
We can be in somebody's house for several hours. Then we can transport them to the hospital, which is another several hours, and not to take away from the amazing work that Hatzalah Beit Shemesh volunteers do. That's a different subject. I'm talking right now about our mental health professionals and the work that they do. I think that's what you need. You need to ensure that you have volunteers who are committed. And that doesn't just mean raising your hand and saying, yeah, I'll be on the unit. Like, no, being on the unit means showing up. It means volunteering. It means when a call comes out that you're able to take it. And that's something that's very important. And I would say that all of our current volunteers in the MHP unit, in the mental health professional units, step up to it. When a call goes out, if it's the middle of the night, if it's a Shabbos afternoon, if it's whatever, we have people that are willing and able to volunteer, to go out there, to get in the field, to help out, to do what they can. So that's really what's needed. You need people who are going to be able to give up themselves in order to have this.
Well, so that basically answered my other question, is that, what advice would you give to somebody who's interested in either joining a Hatzalah organization or starting, adding this type of unit to their existing organization? But I guess you can answer the question.
Right. I would also say take it easy, take it slow. Don't jump right in, because like I said, I didn't know anything about the way that, Hatzalah works. I didn't know anything about any calls and ambulances and transports. Like, there's a language.
Right.
And we had to be, and we when we go into a call, we kind of look at the Hatzalah Beit Shemesh member to guide us in those aspects. Right. And to understand it. So my advice would be, number one, to take it slow. Number one, do it. It's important work.
Right.
If your community does need it, I don't want to say if your community needs it, your community needs it. If you have the volunteers, do it.
Right.
Take it slow, take it easy. And, like I said, look me up. I'm here. And I know that our other mental health professionals, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm sure, we're all here to advise and to help out anybody who's interested in creating such a thing, because we've seen over the last few years that it's beneficial.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Yosef, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure. I learned a lot from you. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead, if you're okay with it, I'll leave your contact information in the show notes for anybody who's listening, who's interested in getting in touch with you about starting an EFR unit in their Hatzalah organization. Okay. And, we should do very good things. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
You got it. WhatsApp is the best, but any form of communication works.
Absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure, no problem.
All right.
You've just listened to another great episode of the HatzalaCast. If you like what you hear, subscribe to our show on all major podcasting platforms. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and stay tuned every week as we reveal a new episode of the HatzalaCast. And remember, if you need help, call your local EMS or Hatzalah organization. Stay safe and stay tuned.